This is the Book of Random Tables. We're going to look at what this book is, what it has inside, and why you as a DM need it, and why you as a player might need something like this. Not a lot of people reviewing or talking about these things or what's inside of them. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome. If you're new to this channel, normally I'm doing terrain crafting and mini related stuff. If you're anything like me, you're a busy dungeon master with a lot of stuff on your plate as it is, especially during the whole COVID nonsense. And there's a lot of prep work that can eat up a lot of time. And so I want to take a look at some assets that can limit the amount of time you spend overthinking little things. And that's where something like this comes in. This is the Book of Random Tables. I wanted to do a couple of reviews on some items like this, something as a DMing utility. And you see these sort of things on Amazon especially a lot. And there, of course, there's things on the DM Guild, but there's really not a lot of people reviewing or talking about these things or what's inside of them. And so I wanted to talk about this one. This was the first one I got, and I've got a few more that I'm really excited to look into. Let me read to you what's on the back. 25 D100 random tables for fantasy tabletop role-playing games. Find items for a wizard's chamber, campsites, desks, and more. Random encounters for different terrains, plus 600 fantasy names. So, let's start with players. If you're a player and you're bad at making characters, or if you get invited to a last-minute game and you need to come up with something on the fly, there are 600 names for you to do a random roll on. And if you're a DM, you know about doing a roll or making a decision and rolling with the punches. If you as a player can be like, oh, I'm going to roll on a table, and I'm going to be a half-orc, and his name is Jabriath, and whatever. You can roll an interesting character, flaws and all, with books and assets like this. Now, for DMs, I think there's been at least one time where your players kind of throw you for a loop and you're not prepared, and that is annoying, embarrassing, and kind of sucky. Here's an example. You're a druid, wild shapes, and goes into the shipmaster's quarters, and your player says, I'm on the roof of the room, what do I see? A globe, a desk, a bed. And in the spur of the moment, you might not have expected your druid to go into the shipmaster's quarters to try to spy something out, and all of a sudden you're having to come up with a way to populate this room. You know, what are some of the obvious things that are going to be in there? You don't know. You're not a ship captain. Maybe you are. I don't know. But with something like this, let's take a peek. So there are random tables for a number of things. This isn't comprehensive. Matt Davis actually has 4 books just like this. He's got random tables 1, 2, 3, and 4, and he's got a couple other things that I'm looking into right now. Items in a ship captain's quarters. False identity papers, tobacco, spear, ship's logs. That might be important. Your players are on a royal ship escorting the taxpayers' monies to the nation's capital, and you suspect that there might be something being smuggled. Perhaps some missives, or there might be some paperwork in here that you can use as leverage to maybe get a little money, or put someone in jail who's doing something unsavory. A letter from ship owner, spices, copper pieces, compass, globe, gold pieces, lanterns, scarves, harpoons, letter from another captain, things like that. You know, this is going to give you a lot of flavor items and a lot of flavor options. Any, even inexperienced, let alone experienced DM knows that players will ignore the things you intentionally put in front of them and then latch on to the things that are unimportant. And so for a DM, random tables like this are critically important, especially if you're having a roadblock or writer's block or anything like that, and you're like, okay, it's 2 hours till my next session, and my players are all excited, they're on this ship, and they don't know what I have in store, and neither do I. You can say, there's a 3-legged cat with an eye patch, and you notice that he has a bell, and, you know, a couple days later, the cat is missing, and you find the bell in the ship captain's quarters. That's a whole adventure right there. You know that the players are going to go bananas over the fact that that cat is missing, and that gives you some time to prepare how they're going to fight the Kraken in the next session. There are culinary herbs and spices. There are items that you find on a goblin. There are forest encounters, mountain encounters, rumors and odd jobs. That's really important. There's a list of catastrophes in here. Like, hey, this village needs to get destroyed somehow, so players go save something. How about pirates come in? And that wasn't planned, I just looked at that. And all of a sudden, your players are thrust into action. I mean, Matt Colville makes a really good point in one of his videos where he talks about good heroes don't want to be heroes. And he uses the example of John McClane. He wants to call the cops and get other people to do things for him. He doesn't want to get involved. And then he ends up being the hero of the whole story because he's being thrust into something. And so having a catastrophe on hand that you can just roll on a table and be like, hey, there's a tornado and it's heading right for the orphanage. What are you guys going to do about it? Things like that are going to be good for your players just to get them to move, especially when they've stalled. But there are some things I don't like about this book. Having all these tables are fine, but it's when you get tables of items that aren't useful, for example. There's an extensive list of semi-precious stones, for example. This is all good, but we're talking very semi-precious stones. I mean, obviously diamonds and jewels and rubies and sapphires are all great, but, tiger's eyes and turquoise, and there are langabinite, varisserite. Now, where I live, there's actually a rock shop about a mile down the road, and the guy in there knows everything about rocks, it would seem. And I feel like a player like him, something like this would be good for, but this doesn't seem like it's worth 3 pages of dedicated space for, where 99% of your players are not going to know what 290 of those stones are, what they look like, and there's no description in there for them. It's just the names. And so if you want to come up with something useful, say in that situation, same thing goes with alchemical ingredients or spices. They're nice to have, like, you walk into a kitchen, what's in the spice cabinet? Salt, pepper, coriander. Like, it's like a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, where there are other tables that are more important. Now, this is just the first book of Matt's 4 books that he has dedicated to these sort of tables, and we'll look at those in the future. But it just seems like wasted space, I guess? I don't know. But in any case, I think this is a great start for a random book of tables. There are many books out there, and we're going to get to them, of books that have some sort of tables. And I'm going to take a moment and just talk about my 3 favorite tables on this list, just to give you an idea of some of the cool things in here. One of my favorite sections in any of these books are the random jobs and rumors. Here's a good one. A mercenary troop is recruiting. Food and wages are offered, but the main benefit is a life of war. Maybe you have players who are murder hobos. That's perfect. Go make them in littler cogs in the greater pain train. Strange cloud formations have been seen over the highlands to the west, and in the mountains and in the hills. Some dock workers say that dragon scales are washing up on the shore down by the wharf. That's interesting. Let's go check that out. So, and I don't want to give away all the stuff that's in the book, but there's some really cool things in there, and I would highly recommend at least starting with something like this. This is a good start. These are about $8 on Amazon for, 30, 25, for 45-ish pages of content. That's a pretty good price. That's well worth the money to me. And it's kind of a nice thing to have on hand. You kill a goblin, what's on a goblin? A knife? What about a bone necklace or some bone dice? Stolen fancy helmet or something like that. There are uncommon things that common folk would have, common goblins would have. And so it's interesting to kind of think of, oh, well, maybe a goblin would be carrying a bunch of pelts to sell to market or something. It gives you a lot of opportunity. Not that you have to use everything that you roll or have to like everything you see, but it gives you options, and that's the important thing. So, next time when your players are like, okay, we snuck into the wizard's library, what do we see? Potions, birdcage. They're sifting through someone's bookshelf. You can roll on the table that has 100 different books on there of all sorts. And there you go. You can rattle off 5 or 6 books. You can just read 1 through 5, and hey, you got bam, 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 bam. And so these are things to, if nothing else, to help you as a dungeon master not look like a chump. You could say these are for the lazy dungeon master, and I know there's a line of books out there called that. But for the lazy dungeon master, the unprepared dungeon master, the short notice dungeon master, the got roped into DMing a game dungeon master, things like this are going to save you a lot of grief. And then that way you don't have to go online and find a random dungeon generator or a random loot generator that's not applicable to what your players are doing or where they're at, and that has no real filters. So, cool book. I would recommend looking into it. I'll put a link down at the bottom for you to find it. So here's my question for you guys. Do you use utilities like this? Do you just make stuff up on the fly? Have you ever used something like this? Did you even know something like this existed? Tell me what you use, and if you use stuff like this, what are some of the things you haven't used that you would like to know about maybe before you buy it? Maybe I'll buy it so you don't have to, and we can talk about it. Anyway, that's the Book of Random Tables. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I appreciate you coming and checking out the channel. Like I said, this is kind of a new thing that I'm trying out, so tell me what you think. Give me a thumbs up. Share with your friends. Let me know what you think of stuff like this. And I'm looking forward to checking out a lot of other game assets, not just books. Maybe dice, maybe some equipment. Who knows, maybe we can get into bags and miniature cases and things like that. So let me know what you think. Thanks for coming. So, pretty good book. I'll leave a